some of our biggest problems, especially in our nation, in our world, is absent fathers. We know that.
Yeah.
But I think that has crept into the church run. And, you deal with it as much as I do, broken homes and broken relationships. And, there's that absent father, factor in the church as well. But what I see that is more, I guess, alarming is we have absent spiritual fathers and men that aren't leading, at a capacity that their family needs them to lead. And we can go into that. I have a whole thing on why I feel like, that they've lost their voice. And
let's go there. Why do you feel like that? Let's jump into that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, I think, Ryan, men have made mistakes. This is what I see more than anything. They have not always lived up to, the calling in which, they have felt upon their life, or they fell prey to sin. And, one thing led to another. But when they make that mistake, there is a condemnation that is placed upon them as the spiritual leader, as the priest of their home. And for whatever reason, they cannot get past that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And it has silenced the voice of good men in our churches. And they don't feel worthy to lead.
It's that shame,
many times.
That shame, that guilt.
Yes. And I very rarely do I see a man that has made a mistake that is able to, in their future, put that mistake behind them and lead in a way that honors their calling. And go ahead.
You are so right in that. That's a very common thing that I see even in pastoral counseling at POA, very frequently. And what do you think is the solution to that?
I obviously, we got to keep teaching it, preaching it. We have to keep, just instilling into men that you are not your mistake.
Exactly.
You
don't have
can
to be
step
defined
back
by
in.
that.
Yes, you can step back into what God has called you.
Would you say that I just know how powerful the presence of love and relationship is, and would you say that remaining with someone, like if I'm going through a dark time and maybe I've made a mistake, and Jerron Carney comes and loves me anyway, is there present with me, doesn't shun me, like maybe somebody in my past would have done that triggers that shame and all in me today. But to me, and that relational impact of I'm going to love you anyway is a huge factor.
Yes. I love the passage, that we have to, we have to love ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's too many men that have fallen out of love with themselves.
Yeah, that's so true.
And
you got to love yourself first if you're going to adequately love somebody around you.
And, I believe, you talking about being present, you know, it's just like with leadership. More of this is caught than taught.
Yeah.
And we got to create a culture in our churches that is true mentorship, that is true one-on-one discipleship, that's not just saying, "Hey, we're there for you."
Yeah.
But be there for them.
Well, exactly. And I think the like our 7 ministry at POA or addiction ministry and all, they've grabbed hold of this and it's working. But why can't we do that in the general church as well? Creating an environment of grace where we love, care, and truth, where we teach people, where we help them grow their capacity, where we help them grow out of those wounds and that sort of thing. But there's no reason why that we can't incorporate even some of the same things that are working in addiction ministry right in the church.
Yeah. What are you seeing in that addiction ministry that is working, that you feel like we can emulate to?
No, wait a minute. I thought I was the host here.
Yeah, I know, but I just you've intrigued me there.
I would say it's the environment of grace and truth. It's the environment of unconditional love, but not just rose petals, and it's not just a hammer. If you only have a hammer, it's gonna create shame. It's gonna create people hiding from not wanting to show their vulnerable parts of their life. If you do rose petals only, love, care only, you don't have change. And
yeah.
I think the Lord calls us on several occasions, John 1:14, I believe it is, to grace and truth. And we got to lead with grace. We got to lead with love, care. That's what brings people's guards down, the vulnerability of people, so that we can give them truth as well in a loving, caring way, not with a hammer. And I think so many people have been raised where it's either a hammer or it's love. And so the love only is going to leave a person immature. The hammer only is going to lead someone to rebel. But a combination of it in the midst together, like an integration of the two, is what is going to create that environment. And I think the addiction ministries typically have that right. That's why you see people being able to, get their, 5-year chip, 10-year chip, or, because they have that grace and truth environment that they've created.
That's so good, Ron. I kind of like this. I'm just going to start asking you these questions.
Let's shift this back to you, Jerry.
Hey, but honestly, in this topic that we're talking about, it's more difficult with men.
Oh, it is.
Because men don't want to let their guard down.
Exactly. And think about it. Why? Because they got hammered by a dad, by, a mentor, a pastor, an uncle. If they show their vulnerable parts, they get hammered. And that's created a sort of a tough side. And so let me ask you this in regards to men. How is that going today? Are men too soft? Are they not too soft? Not soft enough?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I think the general answer is yes, they are too soft. I think, our world has overcorrected. And
to love only.
So, yes, it's more of, just, I mean, it's a tough subject, because yes, the church is called to love, but when it comes to men you know, being soft or not, you know, we're creating a culture that, in my opinion, is passive, is, again, because they've lost their voice, they don't feel like they can step up to the plate. They don't feel like they can lead their homes, lead their wives, lead their children. And then, at the same time, like, I do think, that what you're talking about, grace and truth, has got to be a part. I'm just thinking about my own life. Like, some of the strongest men that I know would get down on the floor and weep with you.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a sign of being soft or being weak. True men understand, their role and calling as a man. My dad, he was a nurturer. Like, that's what made him a great pastor. He he could walk in the room. He was 6'2", Ryan. He could walk in the room, just his presence. He was a bigger man. It commanded. Yeah, he was a manly man. But he commanded, attention, when he walked in the room. And so, obviously that's there, but at the same time, he had the ability to make everybody in the room feel like they were the most important person in the room. I have heard so many people make that statement. My dad was a nurturer to my kids.
Yeah.
Like, he was more of a nurturer than my mom is. So are we creating a generation that is too soft? I think that, the general answer is yes. But at the same time, when someone understands their role as a man in the kingdom, that love, that nurturing spirit, that forgiving spirit, that comes along with it. Like, that's who we are as men of God.